The Linx Xero Authentication Service facilitates all authentication required to integrate with the Xero APIs. This service also facilitates multi-user, multi-tenant integrations, meaning that you only require one Linx service to integrate with all of your users' Xero instances. The Xero Authentication Service can be found under the Xero plugin. Simply drag in the service into your normal solution. Here, you need to set a few properties: the authorization URL, redirect URL, client ID, client secret, and scope. The client ID, client secret, and scope can be seen on your Xero application. You need to set up a Xero application for this to work. Xero applications can be set up on the developer portal. Important that the redirect URL needs to be whatever base URI you're using with callback. I have created all of these as settings. The scope will be dependent on what you want to achieve. The database connection can be one of a few types. You can either connect to SQL Server, SQLite, Postgres, or store the user information in memory. We're going to use SQL Server for this illustration. Please note that you require a pre-created database that you host in order to store the information. Information stored in this database will be tenant-related information such as tenant IDs, tokens, and refresh tokens. Once all of this has been set up, you can now go to the authorization URI. Note that the authorization URI will be whatever base URI you've provided /authorize. To test it out, we can debug our entire solution and start the service. Over here, our authorization URL is provided for us. Then in a browser, we will go to the authorization URL. Here, a user needs to log in with their Xero account. And then we can say whatever organization or tenant we want to give access to. I'm going to select Linx and then allow access. Now I will be redirected to my redirect URL. Note that this page is empty on my side. This is because I did no front-end development. You will, however, receive the user ID back as a query string parameter. We need to grab this user ID as it is important for our later use of the service. In your front-end development, you will likely have a page here that automatically stores this user ID with the logged in user credentials. In the debug, we can also see that authorization has been handled and we received a callback. Now that we've seen what authorization looks like, we can now explore further to see what we can do with the service. There is a getTenants function. This function allows us to see all tenants for a specific user ID. We will need to pass in the user ID here, and if I now run my solution again, start the service, start this, step over, on the right hand side here, we'll see that there are two companies or two tenants for this specific user. Our Linx organization and the demo company, which is available to all Xero users. Depending on which organization the user gave access to, those organizations will be available in this tenant list. Next, we can call a Xero API. The call Xero API allows us to pass in a user ID and the tenant ID, and then call a specific API which is available on Xero. We have all of the methods available for Xero APIs. We need to specify the URL, any query string parameters, and the body if we are going to do something like a post or a put. All available Xero endpoints can be seen on their developer documentation. As an example, you can call the accounts endpoint to get specific information on accounts. For this illustration, we're going to be calling the reporting endpoint to retrieve the balance sheet report. First, we need to paste in our user ID. The tenant ID we need to retrieve from our tenants list over here. For simplicity, I'm simply going to use a for each and loop through each tenant. In a real-world environment, you would have ideally already retrieved the tenant ID and then simply pass that in here. Next, specify your URL, any query string parameters, and the body that you want to pass in. I have opted to dynamically create my URI as I have a setting where the base URI for all of my Xero operations is stored. Now that we've specified the properties, we're ready to debug again. I'm going to debug my solution as the service needs to run. Next, I will debug my function, step over the tenant list, loop through the tenant list, and then retrieve the balance sheet for that tenant. Notice that the balance sheet does currently come back as a string. To make this easier to handle, we can simply copy this body, import the type, and then we can simply assign the output of the call Xero API to that of this type that we created. Now if we debug our solution again, and now when we get to the balance sheet response body type, we can now see that the response body is much more manageable and that fields are much more accessible. You can use these now in later development. The service is well documented in the Linx documentation. Simply go to Xero Authentication Service and you can view all of the needed information to use this service. Links to the documentation as well as an example solution is provided in the description of this video.